or whoever else they may want to work with to provide proper, developmentally appropriate education for young people in their communities, can work to come up with increasingly better educational products and services. It's one thing to say, I care about education, and it's another to actually do something about it. In the information age, there are so many solutions available that only completely clueless or lazy people won't stumble upon something that's orders of magnitude better than what is currently available to the public. Mr. Charles Tips has a nice proposal for a school that pays students to attend. I believe it would be a lovely choice for many students and would easily find its place in the educational market, were said market not so tightly influenced by teachers' unions. And it could even have a place in the market now. Now, I have no guarantee that I'll see what is put in the comment section here, so if you're interested in discussing matters further, you can reach me via direct message here on Quora, or via my business email, linelearning@outlook.com. Thus ends Daddy's answer. Hey, big boy. Is Daddy gonna go and try to put you into bed now? You're getting tired? Daddy put next to the computer. Big boy. Yeah, now you can relax. You can hear the sound of Daddy talking to the people on the stream. You can pay attention to the words, and then you can go to sleep. Yeah, I know you're tired, and I know you want to be awake. What a conundrum, ain't it, buddy? Just go to sleep. Pull that blankie. Yeah. Daddy loves you. Good night, good morning. Good night, morning. Morning, night. Sleepy time, whatever that may be. Okay. So that's that. There's Johannes. Wide awake, even though he's very tired. That's big Johannes boy there. Yes, Johannes. Daddy would have put you on, wrap you up in Daddy's blankie and put you on the floor. Your Daddy's blankie and put you on the floor. And then you can have the bun and the sheepy. It's your sister who has the bun. Yes, Johannes boy. Oh boy, how in the world do you have so much energy after having been up all night? You're looking at me like I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. Anyhow, I will now continue. And hopefully see if I can see if anyone's commented here. Who else thinks capitalism is gonna... Johannes! Leave the calendar alone. Johannes, leave the calendar alone. Who else thinks capitalism is going to collapse in our lifetime? Maybe we should consider socialism instead? I'm wondering, Ben, are you serious or are you joking here with that particular comment? It's, kind of difficult to tell facetiousness from seriousness, in the chat, and I'm saying that with all sincerity. I really don't know, but I don't see capitalism collapsing. If we look and see the different problems inherent in capitalism, which I will admit that there are some depending on how you define it. They're all associated with people being able to use government, with big corporations being able to essentially pay people off in order to erect barriers to entry. Uh-huh. So yes, with the whole capitalism point, I don't think that capitalism is going to collapse. I think that cronyism is, people are going to realize that's bad. And people are going to realize that ultimately having a free market, wherein the government does not create barriers to entry, is ultimately going to provide everybody with what it is that they want better than the non-free market approach, better than the interventionist approach. Because ultimately what you wind up doing is having people that have already made it to the top, then going and putting in central planners who basically work to line the pockets of the people that paid for their instatement. For instance, legislators that go and write laws that would essentially make it difficult for businesses to grow. So let's say I start a business and I want to grow, and then there's all this extra paperwork and all these legal loopholes I have to jump through in order to do it, and that means I need to hire a very competent and very big legal staff in order to do it. Well, that means that I already need to have a great lump of cash to even be able to have a shot at breaking into a particular field. And I wouldn't have needed to have that had the barrier to entry been lower and not been artificially raised up by politicians. And so my gripe isn't with the capitalists, my gripe is with the size of the government, due to the fact that if the government didn't have the power to erect false barriers to entry, anyone with a good idea would be able to bring it to market, as would anyone with a bad idea. And then the market would be able to select for the good ideas, and the people with bad ideas could continue to bring more and more ideas until they had good ones, or work for the people that have the good ideas. And that tends to work really well and bring a great amount of prosperity. Even something so simple as lowering tax rates winds up allowing there to be more capital available for putting into the economy. And people would say, is that speculation? Well, yeah, sort of. Except that the money that you do wind up spending to put into the economy is there for it pays people's salaries. It pays everyone who winds up making anything, even if the idea fails. Right? Even if it fails to put money into the pocket of the capitalist who's investing the capital, the investment capital still remains in circulation. It still remains in the economy. And so the best thing to do is to get government out of it so that you don't wind up having monopolies, because interestingly, whenever a government says we're going to try to prevent there from being a monopoly, then what ultimately that does is they do that, but in name only. Because the corporations will always be a step ahead of the government, because, first off, they're the ones that are largely lining the pockets of the politicians, and secondly, they have large enough legal staffs to be able to read the reams of laws that are generated. So capitalism won't fail. Capitalism is the best way that we know of, and probably the best way we will ever know of creating wealth, of being able to mobilize resources according to how they would be best used. Capitalism, I don't think, is the problem. Now, when you try to socialize things, and you try to do with central planning and have people that are caring run things, you might have the most caring people in the world, but unfortunately, because you're asking people to do things that are against their own self-interest, then you're running contrary to human nature. And then when you run contrary to human nature, you ultimately need bullets in order to make it work. And that is the reason every single socialist project that has ever taken place in the world has failed. The further removed we get from people making individual decisions about their own lives, the further we shield people from the cause and effect of their own decisions, or the further we move toward a purely democratic system whereby 51% can rule over 49%, or 2 wolves and a sheep can vote on what is for dinner, the more destructive the system becomes. I think we have to look more at the question of who controls my life and who controls your life, and see things through that particular lens, as opposed to simply saying that capitalism is bad, because I think that's an overly simplistic view on the matter. Capitalism is neither good nor bad in and of itself, depending upon the circumstance into which it fits. The one thing I can say about it is I personally think that it does definitely more good than bad. And I'm saying that in the context where it would be put into a bad environment, because no matter what, if you have a little bit of capital and a little bit of human ingenuity, people are going to figure out how to get what they want. And it's only once you completely take that away from them that things are very, 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 very bleak. Of course I would say less regulation, of course I would say less barriers to entry, of course I would say all these different things would be good. But those are radical ideas. And whereas you wind up having a great deal of the population of the United States, for instance, espousing them, the people who seek political positions and the people who wind up getting the support of the parties that be don't see things that way. They prefer to grab onto power far more than they prefer to have prosperity as a nation. They would rather be on rung 10 of a 10-rung ladder than on rung 30 of a 100-rung ladder. Because ultimately, they get their pay not from producing anything, or at least producing very little, but by consuming the fruits of others' production. So if you could have a cushy job living off of the taxpayer, then why wouldn't you? The only thing that motivates these people, most of them, is fear for their jobs. So they'll say and or do and or promise whatever they can with the money of other people, give other people stuff. And that is the short version of why politics is such an ugly game, and why that is what actually is detrimental as opposed to capitalism. If you care about people, then let people run their own lives. Like, if you don't want to buy something from Amazon, then don't buy something from Amazon. You have a choice to not buy something from Amazon, but you don't have a choice to not buy the goods and services the government provides by paying taxes. So if you think, okay, what actually gets in the way of my having a choice? Is it Amazon or is it the government? I can choose not to go to Walmart. I can't choose not to pay my taxes. Walmart still gives me a choice. Walmart does not impinge upon my freedom. If everyone decides I'm not going to shop at Walmart, Walmart will go under in very short notice. Their cash flow will dry up and they will be nowhere. Markets will do that. So as long as you wind up having free people acting in their own best interest, I don't see capitalism going away. And I wound up scaring away some viewers, which is lovely. Anyhow, so that's that. And we've been going for a little over an hour, and still have a little bit more to discuss before I hop off stream. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of you that have stayed for your patience, and I'd like to especially thank my wife for taking Johannes and getting him squared away. I wound up having to change a pee-pee diaper, and I think that she might have yet another diaper to change or some milk to give or something of that nature. And she is far more competent at being a mom than I am, which kind of is understandable given the division of labor. I do the streaming, I do the teaching, I do the business aspect of things, and my wife does generally the homemaking and the taking care of the nurturing needs of the kids in that aspect. And we have agreed on that particular division of labor. And the nice thing about having that division of labor is it works just like in a capitalistic system, where if I am more efficient at doing something and you're more efficient at doing something else, that you and I both can go and do what we're most efficient at and then trade with each other. That's called absolute. Those are the principles of absolute and relative advantage. And you always want to be, if you're looking to be as rich as possible, if you're looking to be as wealthy as possible, if you're looking to be as efficient with the resources as you can possibly be, you want to make the thing. You want to make as much value as you can with as little time as possible. So, if in one day I'm able to make, let's say, I'm able to prepare 500 pounds of oats, and you're able to prepare 300 pounds of oats, but in one day you're able to make 5 computers, and I'm only able to make 3. Well, then what in the world use would there be in you making oats or in me making computers? There wouldn't be any use in that. Of course, you would wind up still it just doesn't make sense. Now, of course, that's assuming that, say, 100 pounds of oats was worth a computer, which it could conceivably be if it were like a cheapy Chromebook, whatever. But that's the whole nice thing about having free trade, is that people can focus on what they make the best. People can focus on what they do the best. And assuming that we don't have a toxic society, we can take pride in what it is that we provide. We can take pride in the value that we provide for other people. And we can trade that in good faith, knowing that we're going to get something of equal or greater value back. Which is yet another wonderful point of the free market, is that ultimately nobody is forcing me to do a trade with you, and nobody's forcing you to do a trade with me. If no one's forcing us to trade and you want to buy something from me, then that means you value what I'm giving you more than you value your money. And if I want to buy something from you, it means I value what I'm getting from you more than I value my money. And so when we make that transaction, both of us, as per our own system of values, are better off. Going and having a socialistic system basically says we can't consensually transfer things. We can't consensually make things. We have to go through a central authority, which means nobody, relatively speaking, gets what they want unless they're propagandized into believing that's what they want. That's why capitalism isn't going to go away. Yes, as portrayed in Dickens, schools seem to have been factories for the production of factory slaves to supply human capital for the industrialists. Well, I would say yes and no. Like, I agree that that is what they have accomplished. But I think that everyone is complicit. Everyone is complicit. Certainly in the industrial age, the factory owners that wanted to be able to train people to, okay, when I say jump, you say how high, have that particular kind of an attitude, and jump to the bell, sit down, shut up, and stop driving me crazy. All these other things are certainly taught in schools. But I would also say that many people prefer the calm of despotism to the tempestuous sea of liberty. And so not having to think is a relief for many people. Now, of course, I'm saying if you cut the government out of it, you're going to force people to have to think. It's almost like there's this crushing force from above coming and saying, okay, you're going to do things this way. And the problem isn't with the corporations. The problem is with the government. Corporations wouldn't be able to force you, okay, you're going to go to school. No. Government can force you. Government is what can put the gun to your head and say, I'm taking your children from you if they are truant. I'm taking your children from you if you don't score in the 40th percentile or better. I'm taking your children from you. So I would say that yes, the industrialists are who wound up benefiting, largely. But my gripe is with the government that actually implements it, and with the fact that people have given government that much power over their lives. And I think it's very important that we put blame where blame is due. Admit that people are going to try to act in their own best interest, and then get rid of the compulsion, get rid of the strong arm of the government that people can use to cause others to comply against their will. Do that, and the problem of schooling will be solved, due to the fact that people will be able to get the education that they want in a free market. It's already possible to, for free, the information is available to educate yourself far better than the current educational paradigm, the current school system ever gives. starvation is persuasive as well. True. And to that I would point out the Soviet Union and Ukraine. Because ultimately, let's say, capitalists decide to stop producing. It's like, okay, I'm not going to make you food. It's like, well, then I'll make my own. Screw you. That's the thing, is that people value what they value, and that's. I don't see capitalists starving people. That is the domain of socialists. That is the domain of governments. That is the domain of people who are grabbing for dominion over other people. I don't see that as being an issue with capitalism. I don't know if that was what you were even insinuating, but starvation is a very good incentive. You can look up the Ukrainian famine. I wound up having to unplug this in order to prevent my son from, because he went banging on the keyboard earlier and wound up killing the stream. So, so there's a nice piece about the Ukrainian starvation under Stalin. Where is it? I think this is it, and I'm going to warn you, I'm putting this into the this is not good for little eyes. These are pictures of the Ukrainian famine. The Holodomor. Ah, thank you, Justin. I love... Yes, governments asphyxiate the economy. So yeah. Of course, hopefully things wouldn't get to that particular point, but if you wind up having, for instance, in the time of Stalin, people going and stealing food from the haves to deliver to the have-nots, from the productive to the parasite, then, well, if you guys dare, the link is there. If you guys dare look, the link is there. That is what happens when you let socialists redistribute things. It's not a question of, okay, well, we're on socialist light. It's just the question that the lust for power. The lust for power causes people to do all sorts of things that are horrible. People that were initially in charge of the Soviet Union were the intellectual elite. You wound up having people who knew multiple languages. You wound up having people that were writing poetry in French and playing the piano and knowing their math, knowing their history, knowing their science, knowing all these things. And this paradigm of knowledge that was supposed to save us from ourselves, in the hands of the elite, it didn't do it. because the system in and of itself went against human nature. That little detail, the fact that socialism and submission thereto on a large scale is unnatural, is what causes communism, is what causes socialism to fail and communism to be impossible. And that is actually what causes capitalism to work. Is because capitalism assumes human nature is what it is. Socialism wants human nature to be different than what it is. If we look at socialism in Germany, what that wound up resulting in was the extermination of Jews. Right? And you wound up having these ideas. Stalin wanted to exterminate about 10%. Wherever communism went, about 10% of the population was exterminated, and it was invariably the people that actually were doers. Because the doers, the producers, the people responsible for the lion's share of production knew how things worked, and you couldn't have people in the know being there throughout socialism because they would revolt. So necessarily you take out the most productive members of society in order to make your utopian plans work. And then you also just, periodically go and shoot people that don't work in order to maintain the incentive, because there is no selfish incentive anymore. It's not like I get to keep what I work for. If I don't get to keep what I work for, well then, why work? Oh, I can get a bullet in my head. Well, that's a good reason to work. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Indeed, Justin. Oh, yeah. Communism is far, far, far worse. I mean, National Socialism is evil and bad. But communism did, or not communism, Soviet Socialism did way more atrocious things to way more people. And that all gets swept under the rug because the premises, because Marxism sounds so good. Then there are these people that go and say, oh, well, Marxism isn't the problem. The problem is nobody ever has implemented Marxism right. I understand Marxism better than they did. No, you don't. That's what people say. I understand Marxism. We know Marxism better. We'll do it better than they did. No, you won't. You're trying to tell me that an intellectual like Lenin never understood Marx. You're trying to tell me that Stalin did not understand Marx. You're trying to tell me that Trotsky did not understand Marx? No, 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 no. That did not take place that way. They understood Marx. Just Marxist philosophy was wrong and not implementable. And if you want to go off and have a commune, then by all means, in a capitalist society, you can with a group of your friends go off and start a commune. See how well it works. And yes, Federico, they don't teach that in college, because the lion's share of people in the faculty and in the administration believe the lie. They've swallowed the Kool-Aid. They've taken the poison. They believe the lie. Socialism and capitalism often exist in the same systems. God forbid a pure version of either system. What? Alright, I'm a little bit lost here as to what it is you're saying. there's I don't I can't I can't see how, like, I can see pure social. I mean, pure socialism has. I mean, it can't even work because there's a black market, right? If people want to survive, they're going to have a black market. That's the rule in socialism. But you don't need government redistributive policies, which is what socialism is, in order to make capitalism work. Pure capitalism works. Pure capitalism generates so much wealth. And if nothing else, and I'm going to be very patriarchal here for a moment, if nothing else, the caring wives of the rich business moguls will force enough of them to take care of the poor. But the other thing is that if you wind up having as much capitalism as possible, then you don't. If you have as much capitalism as absolutely possible, then the unemployment thing isn't a thing. If you have people being able to decide on their own means of exchange, if I decide to pay you in gold coins and you decide to pay me for my services and products in silver coins, and we just nix the Federal Reserve out of it completely, we can do that because ultimately our wealth is not in US dollars. Our wealth is in what it is that we actually possess and what it is that we actually produce. So it's completely possible, and I'm not saying that I'm an ANCAP. I'm not an anarcho-capitalist. Although I definitely can see how that might work. I don't think that it's necessary to have socialism siphoning off of the machine of capitalism. Academics are smart. It's because they're smart. I think I think it's because the academics are smart that they fall for it. There are two basic reasons. One, smart people are very easy to manipulate. All you need to do to manipulate a smart person, or at least many smart people, enough smart people to make a difference, is by appealing to their sense of intelligence. Oh, well, you're so smart that you must see this. And then they will constantly be trying to then prove their intelligence by essentially eating whatever lies you feed them. That's one reason that many intellectuals will do that. It's out of a feeling of personal insecurity and insufficiency in them knowing themselves that they're intelligent and they need to prove their intelligence by succumbing to social dogma. That's reason number one. And reason number two is hubris. Bolivia is not a libertarian setup. A reason number two is that, and don't go saying that Somalia as an example either, because it's not. Reason number two that academics do that is another aspect of hubris. And that aspect is that they think that they will be able to have a say in how things are done. They lust for power as well. And ultimately, the only way academics get power is, at least within the current structure, is through government. Otherwise, they'd go out into the real world and do something, and they would actually have their salaries be contingent upon what it is that they do. Now, certainly in private institutions, it is more that way. But even so, a lot of it comes from publicly funded, federal-backed student loans. And so every single academic is essentially having his well-being currently anyhow, being on the back of the U.S. federal government in the context of the United States, and similar structures, even worse structures, especially over here in Scandinavia. Um, so, um, and then they think that they'll be able to also have a say in the way things are governed because people will read their academic papers and take them seriously. They buy that lie. Now, of course, they don't realize that the first thing that happens after socialists achieve absolute power is the intellectual elite have to go, because once they get disillusioned, they become the enemies. And do I think, okay, so there's a couple things. We'll go with Justin's comment first about, do I think that this is the case for all intellectuals or more so for people in the mildly gifted range? I would say, well, I know of, at least, and I actually do know, exceptionally and profoundly gifted socialists. They truly believe in the idea because they have gone through the process themselves of self-denial in some capacity or another and just kind of expect that out of everyone. So I would say that there exists in all of us this ability to divorce ourselves from reality. But I don't know in terms of a percentage, in terms of a figure. I don't have any statistics like that for you, so I'm sorry I can't be of more of assistance. And then when it comes to who fixes the highways, well, if they're privately owned and you wind up having people paying tolls, well, then the owners. Who does basic research? Well, okay, that's actually a tricky one, okay? So if you have, okay, basic research, there are plenty of capitalists that value science. It's not, I would say it's not the responsibility of the government to make sure basic research gets done. And the fact of the matter is, if you wind up having people being on a tighter budget, you're going to have more ingenuity. One of my goals in life is to have a privately funded research lab. And to be able to have high schoolers interested in science doing research and getting paid to do it as part of their education. And then, of course, we got to figure out all the legal loopholes for that, but it's actually not all that difficult. It really isn't. It's actually a pretty amazing way of figuring that out. And all you have to do is basically say, okay, there's a particular way of looking at the world. You got to market it. There's a particular way of looking at the world, the inquisitive way, the exploratory way, the way of trying to figure out new things. And society, in whatever capacity, needs to invest in exploration. I mean, getting $1 million from here or there, from companies that are worth far more than that, or from private people who love science and would love to support it and love to be, show up in their lab and say, hey, what's going on? What did we learn today? There's plenty of people like that. And if we wind up inculcating this attitude of wonder toward new stuff, you don't need the government to force people to do research. Bolivia is not libertarian. The closest I think anyone has ever come to libertarian are some of the Eastern Bloc countries straight after the collapse of the USSR, for example, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, places like that, or the United States at in close to 1776. And then, things devolve from that particular point. It winds up becoming a question of strong and daring men doing stuff, and then people resting on their laurels for generations until things come crashing down. It always works that way. And currently the state is just capitalism producing and then socialism siphoning it dry until there is nothing left. And then having more people rising up and producing more. But yeah, you don't need to. One thing that you could do is if you wanted to have the government doing the highway fixing or so on, then you could have a voluntary tax. You thought what had been and had been collapsed. There's a little bit of a delay, so I'm not entirely certain what it is you were referring to, Mr. Boothby. So if you would specify, it's kind of a bear because there's a 200 character limit, but I'm not entirely certain what it is you're talking about. While you're doing that, I'll have to figure out a title for this stream, because we've been going for, what now? An hour and a quarter? Not quite. This is, I suppose, part 2. Oh, Bolivia. No. No. No, that's not. Is a constitutional foundation predicated upon Enlightenment-era deism integral to the maintenance of a libertarian society, or is it feasible to have a purely secular philosophy that coherently supports libertarianism? Well, that's an interesting question, and I'm not entirely certain that I have an answer. First off, I don't know that it's necessarily okay. There are certain elements of enlightenment that are good. Then there are other elements of the enlightenment that are cancerous. So you wind up having to kind of sort through. You have to sift through the mix in order to have a sufficiently nuanced answer to get to the bottom of what it is that you're saying. Constitutional monarchies also work. Constitutional republics work. The whole idea of the Constitution is ultimately to make it unequivocally clear what the inalienable rights are. Geniocratic mammonism. So you need to have the inalienable human rights, unalienable human rights. You need to have them existing, because you can't ever have legislature trying to remove those from people, because then things just go down the tubes. So then the question winds up being, okay, from where do these rights come? What are these rights? And, one answer to that question is these rights come from God. But interestingly, I'm not entirely certain that that is a theologically correct position to hold when it comes to Christianity. Especially if you understand, that a lot of people came from the position of Calvinism, which basically believes that human beings are corrupt, deplorable, useless pieces of crap that don't deserve anything. And need to ultimately be micromanaged, which was kind of Calvin's position. He was very, very authoritarian, and he called himself a Christian. And then there are the more libertarian kinds. There are the people that Locke kind of had a biblically based thing, but his was mostly humanitarian. Like, there was not too much biblical justification for what Locke said, because he wound up taking a great amount of the Bible out of context. Yes, Justin, indeed. The secular libertarians do try to treat the non-aggression principle as an axiomatic bridge, and it works in as much as the non-aggression principle isn't challenged. Now, it makes perfect sense to have the non-aggression principle. Okay, but then when would it be okay to use aggression? Like, is it ever? Or is that a more nuanced thing? And then you can wind up having that be subject to debate. I mean, I wish the situation were as simple as it seems here in theory, but in practice you're going to wind up having people wheeling and dealing and negotiating every single step of the way in order to get what they want. And part of the human condition is people's lust for power. So the question winds up being, how do you put it in check while still maintaining the hierarchical structure that apparently our serotonin system predisposes us to function within? So ultimately the question is, how do we have order without subjugation? I think libertarianism comes mighty close, but you wind up there is the need for constant education. There is the need for people to be informed about these things. Okay, I would definitely, I would tend to agree with you, Justin, on that. But then there are these questions of theft. It's like, okay, if I'm starving and my family's starving, is it right for me to steal? No, it's not right for me to steal. But should I be killed for stealing? Probably not. You know, I should probably pay back what it is that I stole with interest after stealing. And certainly, you know, extra money for how much that lost value of whatever the product was that I stole was to the person. Individuation on a societal scale. Would you mind expounding on that a little bit, Justin? And of course, if you like, because I know that you have a 200 character limit, I'll let you know that either now or in a future stream, you're more than welcome to join on either voice chat or video chat or something like that, and we can have a little bit more real-time back and forth if either you or Todd or anyone else would be interested in so doing. But 200 characters at a time, if you would explain, that would be lovely, at least for our viewers, because I'm not too familiar with what Mr. Peterson has said. One thing I am familiar with is coffee. 50 centiliters of coffee. Ah. Ah. Seems I've been boring in pouring my coffee, and now we've lost 2 viewers. Oh well. C'est la vie. And nobody's forcing you to stay here and watch this. Okay. What is up with this? I don't know why it is, but on Quora and here on YouTube, I have a disproportionately large number of Argentinians who are following my stuff, and it's really, really cool because, you know, I'm getting the intellectual cream of the crop here. This is awesome. I wind up getting a whole bunch of smart people from Argentina to bounce ideas off of. So, I will attempt to. I'm assuming that Federico, you're having a little bit of trouble with what Justin's bringing up. Okay. So NAP is the non-aggression principle. It's the belief that it is wrong to aggress upon somebody else. NAIP would be the non-aggressive initiation principle, which means that essentially if one were to aggress upon me, I should be allowed to aggress upon them to the extent that I need to in order to stop their aggression on me. So if that would be the question, those are basically some axiomatic principles of libertarianism, and I believe if you want to be a member of the Libertarian Party in the United States, you need to sign an affidavit saying that you subscribe to the non-aggression principle. Okay, sorting oneself out creates ripples into the external world. So if you imagine in a pseudo-Jungian idealistic sense that the world is a reflection of one's internal structure, then I think I see where Justin's going with this, and I would tend to say that I agree. But interestingly, the whole point of it does not even need to be for making society better. The point of sorting yourself out can be entirely for yourself, for your loved ones, for your own social circles, for all that matters to you. You can live with coffee and libraries. Amen, Todd. It's interesting because I believe they gave a piece of what in the world is the word I'm looking for? A piece of advice was given to authors, and it was essentially, if you want to create a dystopia, think about how you would go about making a utopia. Then individuation is vital to the expulsion of neurosis, translating into the truncation of perdition in society. Yeah, and I would say that you're probably getting that from Peterson because he himself is neurotic. I'm not saying that is a bad thing, I'm just saying that I'm assuming that Peterson has had to deal with his own neuroses over time. And so, that is what makes him so good at teaching other people how to do it too. I hope, though, that, please, Federico, if there's any other unclear, anything else that's unclear, just let me know. Because the fact of the matter is, asking questions about obvious things, I need to go and look up a whole bunch of stuff before I feel competent to talk on it. And I know that a lot of people here in the chat have much more of a clue on certain things than I do. So admitting that we don't know something here is definitely not it's not looked down upon. At least I certainly don't. So if there's anything else that needs clarification, feel free to ask here, feel free to shoot me a core message, whatever it may be, and I'll do my best in order to clarify it. I am going to give you a warning that we have about 10 minutes left of stream time. I would say 4, but we'll go and say 10 minutes left of time for streaming before I wind up unfortunately having to quit and get on to doing some other things, like actual chores and work and other such things. Are you insinuating, Justin, that I am conjecturing the hell out of an important subject matter? Like, if we admit, for instance, that something is a conjecture, then you can say, okay, well, this is built upon these assumptions and so on, and this is the fruit of that tree. But then you can completely say, okay, well, my founding assumptions have been disproven, well, I guess that model goes away, and then we can go and do something else. Because a lot of philosophical inquiry, a lot of practical inquiry, a lot of these different things lead down dead ends, or rather lead to showing us a lot of things that don't work and aren't conducive to any kind of good. Well, what are you what are what are we talking about conjecturing here? I kind of fell off the cart then. I'm a little bit confused as to what it is you're now getting at, Justin. I think that we may have one of us may have switched topics and the other person may still wind up being on it. Either that or I'm just not seeing what it is that you're bringing up. So it would be very nice to get that all cleared up before the stream stops, or perhaps in a uh, in a longer form. I mean, while you're writing, I'll go and see if there's anything. So are you saying that it would be... Are you saying that me saying that Jordan Peterson could potentially have neuroses, or be neurotic in a particular sense, or have dealt with it, is a conjecture? Because at least based on what I've seen and the struggles that he's gone with and what I've read about his history in his books and so on, I would say that I'm not within the realm of conjecture, but I'm within the realm of reality. Now, if you the universities fail to provide substitutions for, yeah, largely, yeah, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And if you there's another YouTube channel that I recommend. I don't know if you follow Caleb Beers, but his channel is also in the description. I highly recommend it. So yeah, I have gone and read Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning book, and I started his other book, The 12 Rules for Life, or whatever that may be. So I would say that Jordan, as much as admits to certain things, and ultimately, yeah, certain people have more neuroses than others, but I think that Jordan has had to battle with many of them, and thus winds up being a very competent person when it comes to actually talking about how to deal with them. Now, if you have read Maps of Meaning and have come to another conclusion on the matter, I would love to hear it. Because, well, free exchange of ideas and all that. Well, I see, okay. Fair point. And I will respond by saying, Maps of Meaning is available on Amazon for like $70. And I would recommend reading it. The primary reason. So now we're... Okay, so this is a semantical thing then. yeah, catalyzed his investigation, but then ultimately, upon stumbling on it and being in the place that he is in life, he almost couldn't help but want to share it with other people. In an evangelistic sense. Okay, hey, this is what has helped me. This has been very, very useful for me. These are the frameworks that I found um, have helped me, and therefore I'll share it. Ah, I think Justin would be a little bit better in answering your question, Federico, than I would. But basically, from what I can see, um, it's taking responsibility for your own affairs, taking responsibility for your own life. Um, whatever the social structure may be, going and dealing with your own demons, dealing with your own internal struggles, and so on. And then ultimately, if you wind up having enough people doing that and then encouraging other people to do the same, then society will get better. Now, that's what you do if your goal is to improve society. And as you can see, my bed is no longer made. Jordan Peterson was famous for the make your bed thing. My bed is no longer made. My blanket and pillow are on the floor because I had a failed attempt at trying to put my kiddo to sleep earlier during the stream. Anyhow, on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Eastern European Time. Ah! Oh, that video. Yeah. That's not too bad. There's actually I believe, a link to a full video on that, and he expounds on a whole lot of other topics. Peterson definitely has a level head on his shoulders. I don't agree with everything he says, but he definitely has a level head on his shoulders. Anyhow, our next stream is going to be on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Eastern European Time. What else? Then after that, it'll be Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Monday through Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Through about... Oh, wait a minute. It's only 6:05 a.m. I thought it was 7:05. Oh, wow. We have a whole other 55 minutes before the stream will be over. Well, in the meantime, I'm going to let you know that I need to use the facilities. And so I will put on our very short intermission clock. And be back here in a few minutes after I've had a chance to sort things out. Wow, I didn't realize we're a whole hour behind where I thought we were. We have another hour's worth of stuff to get to. Okay, this is amazing. Okay, with that said, let's get her going with the intermission. Right, well, we're back. Hopefully, you guys can hear me. I was having audio problems the last time we were doing this, so hopefully that wound up getting resolved. Let's see if there's gone anything in the chat in the meantime. Okay. Alright, so we're back. Excellent. I have to go and drink all the rest of the coffee grounds that I accidentally poured into my cup. Oh well. Builds character. And tastes good. Nevertheless. Okay, there's that. And we're ready to go. So, the next thing I thought might be interesting to talk about is type having my computer being a little bit slow. And it has to do with learning. It has to do with what it is that people can do in order to what we can do in order to help ourselves learn better, and what we can encourage other people to do. Because a lot of learning is actually habitual. A lot of learning is we need to set aside time for it. A lot of it is also based on our mental state. We learn in different ways based on our mental state. And so, state control is very important. How do we manipulate our physiology to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves properly? How do we manipulate our physiology such that we make sure that we are utilizing our bodies and our minds to the best extent that we can? And I think that one of the best, first, don't go to school. Those who can't do, teach, and those who can't teach, teach. Oh, well, very good point, Todd. Very good point, Mr. Boothby. I am a very strong proponent for autodidacy, and having that autodidacy associated with whatever it is you want to do. And I'm not merely a proponent, but I'm also an example of how it has worked. Because I would say that the domain of things that I know, for some odd reason, happens to be oddly high. Now, it's certainly not comprehensive, not by any stretch of the imagination. But when you wind up having your dad when you're little, not too little, but little enough for it to be kind of a not necessarily making sense in from a parenting perspective, if you're looking at how people normally do things, to go and say, okay, we are going to do this project around the house now, and you're basically going to do it, and I'll supervise. And what I didn't realize is my dad had been doing these projects his whole life. Not his whole life, but he basically knew how to do all these sorts of things. He had worked on ships, as in, like, he had been on ships and had to work. He had been essentially a latchkey kid, had to be responsible for buying the house for my grandparents because, his dad was too drunk and his mom was too crazy to actually do it. and things of that nature. My father was very competent and had to grow up very quickly, and so he wanted to make sure that I would do that too. And so he gave me projects all the time. There, install this, fix this, do that. And the Home Depot had a big orange book on how to do all these different projects. And so the first time that I said, well, I don't know how to do that, we went to the Home Depot store, he bought the book and said, well, you know how to read, which means you'll know how to do that. And so ultimately I wound up having to go from reading about a project to understanding what that meant in real life terms and implementing it. So there was never this, learning and reality were never too far from one another in my life. Why did I learn math? Why did I learn, calculus and differential equations? Why did I learn about analytic geometry? Why did I learn about physics? Why did I learn about chemistry? Why did I learn about all those things? I learned because I wanted to understand the human body. I learned because I wanted to design airplanes. I learned for all these other different selfish reasons. And I wound up becoming competent to the extent I needed to be competent in order to do what I wanted to do. The motivation was always there. And I just happened to be able to find the resources. And my dad was gracious enough. Amazon was just starting to be around when some of my learning was interesting, so we would get stuff off of Amazon, or we would go to the library, or we would go to the bookstore, or I would dig through my dad's old college books and things of that nature. So you don't need the school, just like Mr. Boothby was saying. Todd is absolutely right. One of the first things that I suggest is, unless what you're doing involves watching a video or using an electronic device, get rid of it. If you have to look at some text or pictures on a screen, print it out. If you have a phone or computer with you, put it away and make sure it won't make any noises for the time you're studying. And the reason is very simple. The screen is a stimulus. It is a different kind of stimulus. The spectrum of light emitted by the screen is different, obviously, than what it is that would be reflected by natural light on a page or whatever. And so you wind up paying attention differently. It winds up captivating your attention differently. And so, if you want to be attentive, then learn to pay attention in such an environment as you have, like a real book. That has actually been very, very helpful, because although I do a considerable amount of reading on my computer, on my tablet, and I have a free blue light blocking app on my tablet and a free blue light blocking software on my computer, however much I may hate to admit it, especially to the people that I kind of razz, I do prefer reading real books. And if, at minimum, print out the books print out the stuff that you need to read from your computer. That it also provides you a great opportunity to take that with you and have the tangible, I'm going to get through this book, I'm going to get through this stack of stuff. And you can mark it up, you can do whatever you want in the margins, and it's okay. It's an awful lot easier than attempting to take notes on your tablet, even though that now is quite easy with Kindle and so on, to highlight text and put stuff in the margins. Part 2, and this is actually oddly specific and still important, is have a morning routine that involves getting hydrated and getting your head screwed on straight. Hydration is incredibly important. And many of us are walking around being dehydrated our whole lives. Many of us are not functioning the way we need to because our cellular metabolism isn't doing what it needs to be doing to the same extent that it could be, due to the fact that we're dehydrated. That also can happen due to poor nourishment, but ultimately that is far, far less of a concern in the Western world than dehydration, just due to the fact that, you know, people can eat whenever they want, almost, in the West. At least, certainly, when compared to at any other point in history, people couldn't. But still, due to the fact that we've existed as a species in scarcity, we can deal with lack of food pretty well, but lack of water will kill us. Lack of water will kill us. So personally, every morning I wind up having about 750 mils of water. And then I wind up having about 700 mils of coffee. And I have a little milk with my coffee, or sometimes I drink it black. Do a little exercise, you know, some calisthenics, maybe some running. It varies a bit from day to day, but basically I have a morning routine that involves getting a bit of exercise, doing a bit of running, making sure that I stay hydrated, and the like. I also get hydrated before bed. Mostly that has to do with wanting to keep my blood as clear as possible, to decrease the viscosity of my blood, to decrease or to make it easier on my heart to pump the blood throughout the night. Gives me a more restful night's sleep, and if I need to get up in the middle of the night to go pee, then so what? I get up at 3 anyway, so it's not like it's that big of a deal. Take control of your insulin levels. So intermittent fasting and eating predominantly low glycemic plants is a good sustainable way to live. You don't need to eat only plants, but that's not a bad thing to do. I really like meat, but I've noticed that the more plants I eat, the less I need meat. Of course, getting that protein, and sometimes, you know, getting a little bit of simple carbs from, you know, some oat bread or something that my wife makes. It's okay, and because I eat in such a confined window, my insulin sensitivity is way higher than it's ever been. I'm able to also subsist on slightly less food than I would otherwise because I'm not hungry, due to the fact I've trained myself to only eat within that certain window, and I'm much more efficient with the food that I do eat. That's just the way the metabolism works. If you wind up training yourself to eat to subsist on a particular diet, you can. And if you avoid the blood sugar highs and lows, you're able to maintain a much more clear head throughout the course of a day. Very, very useful stuff if you can minimize insulin spikes. And you do that by minimizing simple carbohydrates and by nixing sugars. Fructose is horrible. Like, in the context of fruit, okay, I can see that making sense. But in general, especially in the context of like sugars and high fructose corn syrup, soda sweetened with pure fructose, that kind of stuff is evil. It is bad. It messes with your liver. You can get non-alcoholic fatty liver disease from having fructose. So, just keep that in mind. Another thing you can do is have an evening routine that involves getting hydrated. We talked about remain hydrated throughout the course of the day. On a cold day, I drink a minimum of 3 liters. And now that we've gotten past this point, there's something that I've discovered, and this has been a little more recent, or rather, I've had it once, forgot about it, and then rediscovered it because I'm stupid that way. And that is that reading slowly helps. E-readers, I do use some, like on here. But I have the blue light blocking thing, and I definitely prefer to have the real thing. I mean, if necessary, I'll just take screenshots of the e-reader and print it out for my own personal use. Obviously, you can't sell the material or do anything like that, but that if push comes to shove, I'll do that. I also do. I have read this past month. I'm trying to think how many books I've read. I don't even know how many books I've read in written form, but I have read a book and a half on my e-reader here. So it's not completely. Anyhow, going back to read slowly. Read slowly and synthesize. So basically, the way that you teach surgeons, learn one, do one, teach one, works. It's a very, very effective learning methodology. And certainly if you're learning with someone else, then you can go and adopt roles of teacher and student and go through the different subjects and transfer information back and forth and be way more effective than you would be by yourself. But if you are by yourself, one of the best things you can do, and this is even goes for just a learning one, is read slowly. Read a paragraph at a time. Summarize it in your own words. Write down the summary and go back and read. This is something that Benjamin Franklin wound up doing. Benjamin Franklin would wind up reading something. Then he would write a summary, write notes or something like that, and then he would go back a day or a week later, look at his notes and attempt to rewrite what it is that he found. And then when there were essential differences, he would know that, okay, I didn't understand what was going on, I didn't have a full grasp of the language, and so on, and then I would be able to focus on these different things. Ben Franklin's method works very, very nicely for doing this, because it forces you that whatever it is that you're reading, that you would understand it on a deep, deep level. It's a lot slower than just skimming over the material, but ultimately, especially if you require a deep understanding of the material, it's very, very useful and very, very good. Explain things to others. That's one of the many reasons I do things on stream, is it forces me to synthesize my thoughts, and I may come across as an incoherent buffoon. I mean, the fact that you guys are patient with me is so wonderful. But given, given that I may come across as an incoherent buffoon, I try to become less and less so with every single stream. And behind the scenes, I'm doing things like forcing myself to go through Aristotle's rhetoric, forcing myself to read poetry aloud, forcing myself to work on modulating my voice. And I know I'm a work in progress and always will be, but I can already see that I've improved over the course of the past couple months of streaming, just on account of having to do it all the time, and then having the raw footage that I can review and say, oh look, you sucked there, Matt. Matt, you did not do a good job. What are you going to improve? Then having a more easily accessible repository of information that keeps on growing and growing, and it kind of feeds what I'm doing here organically, it helps. So this stream is as much for me as it is for you. Of course, I wouldn't be streaming if I didn't think it would be useful for someone else to see. Study groups in university work that way too. And professional development can work that way, in that if you have a friend that you're working with or something, you can go and push each other. As the proverb goes, iron sharpens iron. You can push each other way harder than you would ever be able to do so yourself, because you're constantly there bringing new information and building somebody else up and being built up by somebody else. So having that kind of a symbiotic relationship with one or more other people really, really helps in the personal development department, especially over the course of many years, which causes everyone involved to be more productive and more capable of whatever their role may be. Oh yeah, think with and around the writer, preferring physical books. An analog library. Oh yes. Oh yes. Slow reading is great. Now there is a place for fast reading, and that's if you want to get a 10,000 foot perspective, if you want to get a bunch of context. Context is nice. Getting a bunch of context is really amazing. but then you can go and fill in everything. Like if you can write a basic bullet point summary, okay, this is what is going on in the entire work, and then we can go deep into each little bit. That's useful. Indeed, next week on Monday, for at least the first part of the stream, and I'm not entirely certain how long it's going to take, we are going to start with the Iliad. We are going to start with the Iliad. 9 p.m. on Monday, we're going to start with Homer's Iliad. And why are we doing that? First off, because getting a classical education is very important, and I know that maybe we've read it, maybe we haven't. I haven't read the Iliad for 11 years until this past week I started reading it again for you guys. But the rationale for doing that is, of course, that it's a classic for a reason. It's withstood the test of time. And given the fact that until recently, withstanding the test of time essentially means providing people with something that will help them get through life, means that there's something inherently valuable in the Iliad. There's something inherently valuable in the Odyssey. Maybe the lessons aren't as explicit as they would be in some textbook, but they certainly do exist and subsist within the actual text. And so we're going to do some slow reading. We're going to read it in verse translated into English in, I believe, the 18th century. I got an older translation of the Iliad, and we're just going to go through it from cover to cover, and then after that we're going to do the Odyssey. Now, it's not going to be too much at a time, but we're going to practice this slow reading, this reflection, the synthesis. And what happens, happens. I will leave a download link in the description of the following video, or maybe I can even, if I can find the document, I'm not entirely certain. I'll have to figure out a way of making it easily accessible. Maybe on the Core Gifted support group I'll have it as an attachment or something. We'll figure that out. Alright, see you, Federico. It's very nice to have had you. The version that I have is by William Cowper. This was... I'm trying to think what year it was. June 4th, 1791. Success in the marketplace? Well, that's a difficult subject, because what makes someone successful is, by definition, in a free market, giving other people what they want. Giving other people what they want. You cannot be a success unless you give other people what they want. Now, a proper understanding of money is this: that if I have money that I earned myself, or if you have money that you earned yourself, it means, I believe Iliad is the word for Troy. It's about the Trojan War. So success in the marketplace gaining money means that I have produced something of value, And now I have these little certificates, these little pieces of paper, the cash or the numbers in the account. That means that I can go and trade them for something else. It signifies that I have gone and produced value, and now society owes me for my production in accordance with what I've produced. If I've produced $1 worth of stuff and sold it, I now have $1 that I can use to spend on goods and services that I want. And the same goes for 100, 100,000, 1 million, 10 million, a billion. That means that I've produced at least that much value for other people, probably more than that amount of value for other people, due to the fact that people won't trade their money for something unless they perceive that they're getting a good deal. So having money means that society owes me for my contributions. So success in the marketplace literally means giving people what they want or need. Ah, okay, I see. Oh, so you weren't asking me to talk about success in the marketplace. Oh boy, I am such a nincompoop. No, that's actually a very good analogy. I just was that's the difficulty with text is I didn't know it was like talk about success in the marketplace, as in like talk about success in the marketplace. Tell me about it. Hear it. Yeah. Versus talk about a success in the marketplace. The Iliad is. Ah, yes. No, it's a great analogy. It's a great analogy. I just didn't get it because yeah, the text and me being a little bit not particularly perceptive. Yeah, the Iliad is definitely something of value that has survived the marketplaces of civilization. The interesting thing is now that it's been in the public domain for so long, and it's free, people tend to value it less. So you go out and you pay and you buy a paperback, it's entirely possible that one might value it more. It's entirely possible that one might value it more if they pay for it. It's also up here if you think, okay, I paid for something, I gave something of my own that's valuable to receive this, then I'll appreciate it more. Just a thought. Anyhow, I'll write the William Cowper. I'll just write that there as a reference. For whoever may want to get the particular translation. I'll leave a download link in the description of this video once I actually find it again, because I have a text file here on my computer and I'm printing it out little bit by little bit. On that note, it seems that everything is kind of winding down. Thank you, Todd, for sticking around. Thank you, everyone else who is watching it as a video as opposed to live. I look forward to seeing you on Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, or whenever you happen to see the next videos. All the best, and until next time. See ya.